Hi, I'm Vicky. Welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time here, then thank you for joining me. This is Rocked Up Frocks, where I take vintage and pre-loved clothing and give it a makeover. Today I'm making over this gold satin dress that I bought in a charity shop for $20. And this makeover is going to be a Disney Belle Beauty and the Beast inspired makeover, but I'm going to give it a bit of a pin-up feel. And I'm going to be styling this whole look. I've bought a wig, and then I've got Kimmy from What Would Blair Do coming to film a makeup tutorial. She's going to do me my pin-up Belle makeup look to go with this dress. To turn this dress into my pin-up Belle dress, I'm going to be using yellow organza and gold sequin fabric. This dress is a little bit too small for me, so the first thing I'm going to do is unpick the zip and stop it a couple of inches below the waist, because I'm going to turn it into a lace-up back. While I'm unpicking the zip, I'm also going to take this waistband off. It's sewed into the waist seams and side seams. I've unpicked along the top, and I'm just going to cut it as close as I can to the side seam and the waist seam. Those edges will be hidden under the layers of sequins and organza we're going to put on top of it. I've unpicked the zip and I've cut it off just below the waist, and I've finished it 2 inches below the waist seam. To do that, I've just done a little bit of hand stitching and done a few threads across the teeth to stop the zip pull coming up too high, and then I've just stitched it slightly in from the edge onto the seam allowance. Next, I'm going to cut the skirt lining out because it's too tight to fit over a petticoat. I'm going to cut it off and then just turn the excess up onto the bodice lining and run a line of stitching down there. I'm then going to cut the skirt to the finished length that I want, which is 18 inches. So I'm going to measure down from the waist, mark 19 inches, and then do a hem and machine stitch it to the right length. Here's what my bodice looks like with that excess from the skirt lining just stitched up to the inside, and I've machine stitched my hem as well. Next, it's time to add a layer of gold sequins to the bodice. So I'm going to take the cut edge of my sequin fabric. Now this sequin fabric has got a bit of stretch to it, which is going to help get it over everything. So I'm going to find the middle and start at the centre front and pin it all over the bodice, stretching it where it needs to be stretched and maybe putting a couple of little pleats where it needs to pleat. And I'm going to stop right at the edge there and not turn it to the inside. And then once it's pinned on, I will cut it and hand sew it. I'm going to pop it on my mannequin and keep pinning it on there. My sequin layer is pinned on. I've cut it off just at the very top and at the waist. Then at the back, I've folded it to the inside. Next, I'm going to hand stitch around all the edges. Next, I'm going to add an organza overlay to the bodice. I've taken a square of my organza and I've pressed it in half along the bias to form a big triangle, and where I've folded it, that's going to form the top part of the bodice, which will turn and stitch inside. So the first thing I'm going to do, quite gently without stretching it too much, is just pin that all the way around. And then next I'm going to start creating some pleats. So I'm going to lift both layers together, and then I'm going to pin these pleats in place. I like this because it's giving us that sort of 50s prom dress feel. Just keep pinning and playing till you're happy with it. I've got one side that's gone beautifully and one side that's sitting a bit funny, so I'm just going to keep pinning and playing, and then once I'm happy with it, I'm going to cut it off at the waist, turn this to the inside and hand stitch everything into place with clear thread. This is how it looks when it's all pinned on and cut, and I think it's looking really cute. It's got that, definitely got that 50s prom dress vibe going on. So next I'm going to hand stitch everything in place with clear thread. Next I'm going to run 2 bits of boning down the seam allowance at the centre back. So I'm going to put one right as on the fold as it folds in, and then one about 1/2 inch in from there, and I'm going to finish them just where the zip stops. So I'm using this thin plastic boning, and I'll just put some satin offcuts on the ends to stop them being sharp. This is how our boning looks once it's in. If you don't have enough seam allowance here, you can sew an extra bit of fabric on. So once that's turned in, that's going to sit inside neatly at the back like that, and then our eyelets will go through this gap between the boning. It's a bit narrow at the bottom, but I should still be able to get them through there. Next, I'm going to start cutting the fabric for this skirt. I'm going to cut a circle of gold sequins, a circle of yellow organza, and then another circle of yellow organza that's twice the length as the first one, and that's the one we're going to gather up to get that ruched Belle skirt look. So to work out the size of circle I need to cut, I've worked out that the waist of the dress is 28 inches or 71 centimetres. I googled a circumference to radius calculator, and you just put in your measurement and it will tell you what your radius and your diameter is. So my 71 centimetre waist has a radius of 11.3 centimetres and a diameter of 22.6 centimetres. I want the length to be 19 inches, so I'm going to cut it to 20 inches to give me ½ inch top and bottom. And I'm sorry I switched between centimetres and inches so much. I learnt to sew in inches, but I use centimetres a lot too, and the calculator was in centimetres, so I'm kind of using both. So to cut my circle, I'm going to fold my fabric in half and in half again so it's quartered, and then I'm going to cut my first circle from the corner 11.3 centimetres down, which will give me the radius, that's my radius, so that will give me the quarter of my waist measurement. And then from this mark here, I'm going to cut 20 inches down, so measure 20, 20, 20, 20 and cut that as my circle. Then for my top layer, I'm going to do exactly the same, but I'm going to cut it 40 inches to give me loads to gather up for the top layer of the skirt. I've got my first layer of fabric and I've folded it in half and in half again, so I've got all 4 layers here, and from the folded corner I'm going to start marking my, it was 11.3 centimetres, I'm going to do 11 just because it will stretch a little bit. So I'm going to mark right from that corner 11 centimetres. In fact I need to open it up and have a little bit of a seam allowance where the zip is. I'm going to do it 12 centimetres, and if it ends up a little bit too big we can just gather it slightly. Next I'm going to do exactly the same and measure 20 inches down from where I've just cut all the way around, and just mark it with my little disappearing pen. Now that's cut, I'm going to use that as my pattern to cut the gold sequin fabric, which will be exactly the same size as this, and then to cut the other layer of yellow organza, which is going to be twice the length. So I've got my gold sequin layer and my short yellow organza layer cut. I've just stitched up a ½ inch hem on the sequins, and I've done a rolled hem on the yellow organza, and now I'm going to join those two together at the waist with the yellow organza on the outside. So I'm just going to pin them together and then put them to one side while I work on the top layer. This is my top layer of the organza. Because this was wider than the fabric, I had to join 2 widths of fabric together along the selvages and then fold it in half and in half again to get the quarters. So I've cut it out, I've joined the sides, I've overlocked the hem, and I've also marked it into 16 equal sections, which I did while it was still folded in quarters on the floor. Each section is marked from 8 inches below the waist right down to the hem, and now I'm going to gather these up by putting them on my sewing machine and using the longest stitch. I'm going to back stitch a couple of times at the top to keep it really secure, stitch all the way to the hem, and at the hem I'm not going to back stitch. Then I'm going to lay it in a big circle on the floor and gather all of these up until they're equal, and then tie the ends off. All 16 of my stitching lines ready to gather up have been sewn. Next I'm going to join all 3 layers of the skirt together at the waist. Then I'm going to lie it flat on the floor to gather these up so I can see that it's even all the way round. My ruffles are all gathered. I'll even out the gathered once I've joined the skirt on. I've just cut down the centre back for the opening of the zip and the bottom of the lacing, and now I'm going to join the skirt onto the dress. So to do that, so much fabric, I'm going to pin it on right sides together and then stitch about 1/2 inch above the existing waist seam. To make the shoulder drapes, I've cut a piece of organza on the bias. I folded it in half and stitched it 6 inches from the folded edge, then turned it through and pressed it. Once I got the skirt on, I decided that the pleats on the bodice were too regular, so I just unpicked them all and I just moved them to make them a little bit less even. I'll stitch them back down in a minute. I've also added an extra width of fabric, made exactly the same way as the shoulder drape, just to form a little waistband there, just to give it a bit of definition. So next I'm going to pin the shoulder drape on. To add the shoulder drape, I've marked the centre front, put a little gather in the centre of our drape and pinned it on. And then these are going to come out and sit around the shoulders, but I'm going to have to try it on to get the length of them absolutely right. Next I'm going to sew this on at the centre front, sew all these pleats back in place now I've changed it, and then I'm going to hand stitch all of this down the back to make it neat. Now everything's sewn back together, the next job to do is to put some eyelets into the back and then make a panel to go under the lacing. I'll link a video above which I show you the full process of turning a zip-up dress to a corset back, and in that you can see how to put the eyelets in and how I make the panel to go under the lacing as well, so check that out for all the full detailed instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to put it on and finish off the shoulder drapes. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing me transform this $20 op shop dress into this Belle costume. Click the link above to see the full makeup transformation that Kimmy did on me as well. As soon as that's up, I will put the link there for you and in the description as well. She's done a perfect job. I adore this makeup. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please click the bell so you get notifications of my future videos, and I will be back very soon.